Welcome to Take the Lead Radio with Dr. Diane Hamilton, where she interviews some of the most successful leaders, entrepreneurs, authors, speakers, and other individuals who will inspire you to take the lead in your career and personal life. And now, here is Dr. Diane Hamilton.
I am here with Bob Burg, who's known as one of the 30 most influential leaders and has been named one of the top 100 most influential authors in the world. He's a recent inductee to the National Speakers Hall of Fame. He is everywhere. His books are so well known. You've probably seen The Go-Giver, a Wall Street Journal and Business Week bestseller, is sold over, I think, more than 800,000 copies. And he's got new books out. His latest one is what I want to talk to him about today. So I'm really looking forward to talking to you. Bob, welcome.
Hello, Dr. Diane. Great to speak with you.
You know what? I was watching one of your videos, and I think you probably do one of the best Zig Ziglar impressions, by the way. Did that take some time to perfect?
I think it's because when I first got into sales and I got his, now get this, cassette tapes, okay? That's how long ago this was. Cassette tapes, I think that's one less than an 8-track, okay? That's how long. It wasn't even CDs. And I just listened to it so much that I began to be able to imitate him. And it was really funny because one time I was in an airport and I heard somebody speaking on the phone. And, they were trying to sound just like Zig Ziglar. They were trying to imitate him. And I thought to myself, I do a much better Zig than that guy does. And I kept walking. It was Zig Ziglar.
Oh, that is so funny. Now, well, I've seen you on stage with him. Was that how you met him?
I actually was, I didn't meet him right there. I was because he was on the phone and I didn't want to bother him, but I actually spoke on stage with him a little bit after that, and I told him about that. I told him I did a better Zig than he does, and
I think you do.
He laughed. He's such a kind and gracious man.
Everybody who's met him said he's his greatest guide. I can't, I mean, what was that like to meet him?
Something, it was a real thrill for me because not only did he just help me so much in terms of being a salesperson, but just, there was just something about, he was very, very genuine, very real. He was the same Zig off stage as he was on. And really, it was an honor to be able to meet him.
Well, I noticed that you do include a lot from what you've learned. I mean, some of what he said. I was watching some of your videos. You talked about the difference. I think it was what was it, cost and the price, and you. Oh,
price and cost, yeah, and reacting and responding,
right.
And those are a couple of big things. Of course, I always give credit, always give proper credit, which he always did when he was on stage. But he certainly had a very big impact. Now his son Tom is really running the company now and carrying on his dad's legacy, and it's just really neat.
Well, okay, so you've probably incorporated a lot of what you've learned into all these books. Now, you've written so many books. How many books have you written now?
I think it's up to about 11 or 12 or something.
So many. And, this latest one's interesting to me because you're talking about the go-giver influencer. You're talking about influence, and influence is such a hot topic right now. How is this book different from your past books?
How is it different from what?
Your past books? Anything?
Oh, well, I guess on a couple of levels. One is other books of mine have been on the sales and networking aspects of business, relationship building. Then we had the John David Mann, my co-author on the Go-Giver series. The first one, which was the original, The Go-Giver, was really it was for entrepreneurs, but it really came from a sales context and so forth. And even in that first book, we had the law of influence as one of the 5 laws. In this one, we really wanted to drill down deep and look at what influence is, what it's not, because there's so many misunderstandings regarding the word and the term itself, and really look at how people could kind of communicate a lot better, a lot more effectively. And I saw in one of your videos, and by the way, I've got to tell you, I think I saw one of the videos I saw that you did was like 1 minute and 46 seconds. I've never seen so much value put into 1 minute and 46 seconds, less than 2 minutes.
Thank you.
I can only imagine. I'd love to see you speak one day personally and get the whole the whole Dr. Diane. Yeah. So that was really great. But as you talked about, even in that video, communication is really the thing. And I think we need to do so in a way that we seek understanding. These days, a lot you see this on social media a lot, but you also see it in real life, IRL, and at whether family gatherings or social occasions, where it used to be when you disagreed, it was like I'm right, you're wrong, which still isn't good, but at least that was doable. Now it's I'm right, you're evil, and we're seeing that just, and it's almost like dehumanizing those who disagree with us. And that not only is it not a kind way of communicating or connecting with someone, but it's not helpful. No one's influencing anyone else. It's people are just staying stuck in their attached beliefs.
Well, do you think it's any different by generation, or is it just across the board that way?
I suspect that's always been an issue, but I think now because we have so many more platforms, there's so many more TV shows that are trying to get eyeballs. There's so many now online platforms that, again, they want eyeballs. And with social media, by the very nature of the animal itself, it's providing a platform to everyone. That's the good news. The bad news, it's providing a platform to everyone.
Right.
So, what it means is you can spew your opinions even if they're really not well thought out, and even if they're not polite, and it's become more and more accepted. So I think, although we'd like to think that as human beings we've grown and evolved in certain ways, there's been a little bit of devolvement.
Right. Well, it surprises me all the time. I'm stunned by what people will write. And I wrote my dissertation on emotional intelligence, and you see a lot of issues with that out there. And it's interesting to talk about why people have lost, a sense of empathy and some of the things that, I don't know. You wonder what Zig would say now on some of the stuff, and you wonder about where it's going. And I love your book because you talk about secrets to influence. You have 5 secrets, right?
Right. And they really shouldn't be secrets because they're pretty,
Well, then tell us what they are, so they're no longer secrets.
We want them to not be secrets. We want everyone to know them because they're really they've been around forever. And hey, let's face it, effective communicators, they tap into these, whether it's whether it's intuitively or whether it's learned, just like the people when you talk about emotional intelligence, and which of course is something that can be learned. Right. There are people who have a maybe a proclivity toward it, and that's fine. There's but it can be learned, and there's no reason for it not to be.
Well, that's interesting. And before you list any more of the 5, I'm curious, since my latest book's about curiosity, do you think curiosity can be learned?
Can curiosity be learned? Yeah, but I'd say the person who is naturally not particularly curious needs to understand why it would benefit them to be curious.
Right. Yeah.
And then of course learn a system that you teach for doing so effectively.
Well,
and that's really what it tends to be. Most things can be learned. Let's face it. But it first begins with an understanding first of why not doing so is counterproductive and why doing so would be productive.
Right. Well, I think that a lot of people who need it don't really look into it, or they're told in a way that's not very helpful, that they aren't curious. I love the way you said your dad defined tact as the language of strength. And you have to be tactful in helping people. And is tact one of your 5? Tell me more about the 5 secrets.
Sure. Well, it begins with mastering your emotions, and of course, you're the expert, in that. With us, it's just one part of what we're talking about, but it's so important because really, it's where it begins. because, as you know, it's only when we master our emotions, when we're in control of ourselves, control of our emotions, that we're even in a position to be able to take a potentially negative situation or person and turn it into a win for everyone involved.
Right.
We know this, yet how often do we allow, based on what someone else says or does, we allow our emotional hot buttons to be pushed, and we cause ourselves to be frustrated or impatient or angry, right? And we say or do the very thing that's going to take us off accomplishing what we want, right? And we know this, yet we do it anyway. And I think the reason is because we're human beings and we're emotional creatures. It's how we're built. And we'd like to think we're logical, and to a certain extent we are, but we're pretty emotionally driven. We make major decisions based on emotion. We back up those decisions with logic. We rationalize, which is to tell ourselves rational lies. Right. And so, so what we need to do is, and it's not that we're saying that, that we should deny our emotions or forego our emotions. First, that wouldn't be logical, right? It would go against human nature. But also, there's no reason to. Emotions are a wonderful part of life. They bring us joy. They make life worthwhile. No, we're just saying that make sure you're mastering your emotions rather than your emotions mastering you. Or as one of my great friends, a wonderful authority on leadership, Dandi Sumachi, as she puts it, take your emotions along for the ride, but make sure you are driving the car.
Yeah, that's great. That is great. And I think that you bring up some really important points on communication, in general, is such a tough topic. I mean, I still teach so many courses at different universities, and communication is in almost every single course. And we talk about the problems with the emotions and the things that you're bringing up. But there's so much written about it. There's so much telling you how to get better at it. Why can't we get better at it if we know it's such a problem?
I think a lot of that has to do with what I call the clash of belief systems. Now, this is, principle number 2, or secret number 2, is to step into the other person's shoes, which sounds kind of trite. We've all heard that before, right? Step into the other person's shoes. It sounds easy until you realize that most of us have different size feet. In other words, we come from different beliefs, different ways of seeing the world, a different paradigm, right? And I would say that most conflict is the result of 2 or more people seeing the same basic thing from different viewpoints. But as human beings, we tend to believe that other people see the world basically the same way we do, which, when you think about it, makes sense. How else could it be? It's all we know. It's how we see the world. And that's why you hear people say things like, oh, nobody likes that, or no one would want that, or, oh, everyone would like that. Well, it's not true. We would, and other people would, but not everyone. But we're basing it, and so that's where so much communication breaks down. It actually never gets started because we think we're communicating when we're really not. And that's why we say that the most important 2 things when it comes to being able to step into someone's shoes is ask questions and then listen.
Right.
You ask questions because you don't know. And the biggest mistake we make is thinking we know what someone else is thinking. We don't. We can't read minds. We don't come from their belief system, or thinking that they understand what we're thinking. So communication is key. But first we have to ask questions so that we understand what this person needs, wants, desires, what problem they have that we can help solve, or what have you. And then when we listen, we need to listen not just with our ears. That's, kind of the surface listening so many people do. We've all been guilty of it. I know I have.
Right. Well, we all have.
Listening, right, yeah, listening so that we can make our point, right? And so so one of the mentors in the story says, don't just listen with your ears, listen with your eyes, listen with your posture, listen with the back of your neck. In other words, listen with your entire being. And when we do that, 2 things happen. One is we do actually have a better understanding of what they're thinking, of their beliefs, of where they are. Number 2, the other person feels heard. They feel listened to. And as you know, as an expert in emotional intelligence, people want to really feel as though they're understood.
Right.
And they want to feel as though someone. And so, really, I think those first two secrets. It's funny because you go back to emotion for a second, and I really believe that when you can control your own emotions and help the other person to work within the context of theirs, you're already on your way to being a great influencer.
Right.
So when we combine that with asking the right questions, now the communication process begins.
Well, it's interesting as you're talking about asking the questions, which is, a lot of my research for the curiosity was about this. I found that there were 4 things that kept people from being curious, and you're listing some of them. You're going right into my book. You're writing it for me, actually. Part of it, the first 4 things really are fear. No one wants to look stupid or fail or whatever. But the second one is assumptions, and that's pretty much what you were talking about. No one,
Exactly.
Right. And then technology, of course, doing things for us or we don't know how to figure out. And then environment, how our family, our belief systems, and all these things you're talking about, really. And I find that really fascinating. And then as you're talking about listening and the importance of listening, a lot of things I try to get through to my students is and even in the talks I give is when you're listening, to make sure you're understanding, it helps to paraphrase. And like a lot of my students will like copy and paste content into their, they'll do big citations, really long things. It just shows me they know how to copy and paste really well, but it doesn't tell me anything else, right? So in real life, don't you think it helps to paraphrase? Like, this is what I hear you mean by that. Does that help?
Very much so. In fact, we even talk about that when we talk about. Let's take it right there because you make a great point. And let's talk about that. Here's a thought right here. Here's an example. Let's say you're in the corporate environment and there's a team, a work group of 4 people. There's one team leader and there are 3 others. And the team leader says, this is Monday morning. Team leader says, "Hey, we just got word about this project. Things have changed. We've got to get it in. Everyone's work needs to be in as soon as possible." Okay? And so everyone says, okay. So it's Friday. It's Wednesday afternoon, 5 o'clock. And the team leader says, okay, everyone, where's your work? Well, only one person has it in. Now, why? Well, because as he said, as soon as possible. What does that mean? Well, to one person who's worked with this team leader for a while, that means you drop everything. You've got a couple of days to get it in. One person comes from another team where as soon as possible meant first finish what you're already doing and then, do this. The other person comes from another company where as soon as possible meant absolutely nothing. You give it lip service and then you do your own thing. So you've got. But what if one of the people on the team said to the team leader, "Hey, Pat, just for my own clarification," and that's the tact part, or just for my own clarification, when you say as soon as possible, is there a specific day or time you're thinking of? And then Pat would say, yeah, Wednesday afternoon, end of day, 5 o'clock, it needs to be in. So now, as soon as possible means one thing. So as you said, rather than assuming, the person asked a question, asked for clarification. Now, the question might be, well, why didn't the team leader just say that? Well, I don't know. Why do people not communicate well? They just don't.
Right.
And they don't think of doing the things you teach them. So, so absolutely, it helps to paraphrase back and just make sure. And in that case, it was even more than a paraphrase. You actually asked what they meant. But absolutely paraphrase, because we should never assume that we know what they mean by what they say, and never assume that they know what we mean by what we say, because we don't and they don't.
Yeah, and sometimes you get to know your people. I actually had one of my previous bosses would say, okay, just because I said I need this, Diane, doesn't mean you have to do it right this second. Because he knows the second I get it, he's going to get it within 35 seconds because I can't handle something hanging over my head. But with other people, I think it's really important because you have to get to know the people and understand their working relationship. And now that everybody's job hopping more instead of staying 20 years in companies like when I started, in the workplace, you really don't get to know people as well, do you?
Right. Oh, exactly. So it's even more important to make sure we're communicating correctly.
Right. So any other secrets of influence?
Yeah. So number 3 is set the frame. And this really is so very important important that when you do it correctly, you're about 90% of the way to the results you want. A frame is simply the foundation from which everything else evolves. My favorite frame story has absolutely nothing to do with business. It's something I saw when I was drinking coffee and reading at a local Dunkin' Donuts restaurant. And this is a few years ago. And there was a little boy. He was probably 2.5 years old, a little toddler. And he was running around the restaurant when his parents called him over to the table. So he starts walking over there, or running actually, and as he did, he slipped. He took a spill on the floor. Now, he didn't hurt himself, you could tell, but you could also tell he was shocked. He was surprised by what happened. Obviously, this was not part of his experience. And so he immediately looked at his mom and dad to get their interpretation of the event. Right, what happened. He wanted to know what happens next. Now, I truly, truly believe that had the parents gotten upset and panicky and, oh no, are you all right? He'd have started to cry. But what they did is they just absolutely handled it so beautifully. They walked over hurriedly, but very, very calmly. They smiled and they applauded and they laughed and they said, oh, that looked like so much fun. What a good trick. And immediately the little boy began to laugh. Now, what the parents did is they set a productive frame from which he could operate. And so when we bring, let's say we bring to a conversation a smile and, that we look at the person and we open our body language or whatever it is that we do to make this person feel comfortable, we set that frame. Now, the key, though, is what do you do if someone has already set a negative frame?
Yeah, very good question.
And let's take the situation where, let's say you're in sales and you're about to do a presentation, and the prospect kind of is defensive, they seem in a bad mood, or they seem challenging, or and they say something like, well, I don't think I'm an easy sell, or I'm not buying anything, to what have you. Who knows why, right? And you can't really ask at this point, and because it may not be appropriate, but there's obviously a frame of it's an adversarial frame. So if you buy into this frame, and you're defensive, and it's just not going to result in a good situation. So let's instead reset the frame, and we might do that by saying something like, Mary, while we've been able to help a lot of people with this product, whether or not it's the right answer for you, we simply can't know without exploring deeper and determining whether it meets your specific needs. So please know our conversation is for both of us to discover this. And if it does, great. If not, that's okay too.
Yeah.
So, what we've done, you're right, we've reframed it from adversarial to one of two allies just looking for the right solution.
You're bringing back 30 years of sales experience. And I'm thinking of I can remember I was a pharmaceutical rep for about 15 years.
Oh, okay, sure.
And I remember calling on this one doctor, and I went to shake his hand, and he said, "Don't touch me." And I remember thinking, wow, well, there we just set the frame. This is not going to be fun. And it's interesting because it turned out he had a cold. He just didn't want to get me sick. You never know what it is that's going to be the thought behind what this negative that we perceive as a negative stage that's been set, right? And,
right, exactly.
And I think that's a really great point, and I love the story of the little boy, because anyone that has kids can relate to that. As soon as you start panicking or having a certain reaction, people are going to react based on what you do. So
sure, and no, exactly. And one of the characters in the book, she says to one of the mentors, the judge, she tells Jackson, her protege, she says, in every interpersonal transaction, a frame will be set. The only question is, who is going to set it?
Oh, that's great. I like that. Yeah. You want to have a certain amount of control. And salespeople, it's so interesting to me to see how sales has changed, because it's not so one-on-one as it was when I was in it. And I went to dinner recently with Tom Hopkins. We talked about all the stuff that it used to be, and it's so different because now it's more team oriented. Is it challenging to help people with that, setting the frame now that it's a team, or is it still the same principles?
Well, it depends. Because now you do have more complex sales. There are simply more moving parts.
Yeah.
So
Right.
yeah, there's a lot. Did you just say you went out to dinner with Tom Hopkins?
Yeah, he was on my show, and I didn't even know we lived near each other, and we both go
Oh,
to the same club, and so we met for dinner. He was such a nice guy.
oh, he is, and Tom's book was the first sales book I ever read,
Oh, he was
and
a
How to Master the Art of Selling. And I eventually got to appear on stage with Tom a couple times, and he has just always been great. In fact, he has one of my quotes on his homepage.
That's awesome.
Uh, yeah, because I've said, he just totally I had actually read his book before I read Zig's, and Tom is the person who really showed me that sales is something you can learn and something you can apply, and I just think he's a fantastic guy.
Well, yeah, it came so easily, naturally when you talk to him, and he was great about talking about how he first got on stage and how it went. And I was fascinated by his story because,
Yeah,
especially I'm in Arizona, so, he's such a huge name here, especially, as in
yeah,
everywhere. But, when you get to meet these people like you, and I've been friends with a lot of the Hall of Fame speakers, for sakes, I'm trying to think, Joe Calloway, all the people who've been on my show. They're just so, you guys, it's so great to see how you guys find your niche and how you just really excel in the direction you go. And I know you're such a cultural behavioral expert, and that's right now, that's so huge. And you even have a Go Giver podcast, right? You have all this
yeah.
to educate people, and I love talking about this stuff because it's so important. It's not just for sales, it's not just for one particular area, it's just so all encompassing what you talk about. And so I mean, talking about setting the frame, we've got the communication, all these things that go in so many aspects of what people need to deal with in communication. And so I want to make sure we get the last two in. So what is
Okay.
number 4?
Well, the fourth one is communicate with tact and empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And tact, again, as you were kind enough to mention, my dad has always defined as the language of strength, and I've always enjoyed that because to me it does take a strong person. It takes a mighty person to not just react, right? To not just fire back that nasty email or give an opinion before thinking it through and before really, in a sense, editing our speech, editing ourselves and saying that, is what I'm about to say, is it going to build up or tear down? Is it going to hurt, help, or is it going to harm? And tact is really a way of communicating something to someone that they may not have been excited to hear, but doing so in such a way that not only are they not defensive toward you and resistant to your idea, but they are open to you and more accepting of your idea. And there's a lot of strength when you can do that. Empathy, which of course, again, it's as an expert in emotional intelligence as you are, you know how important empathy is. And, literally it's the identification of or vicarious experiencing of another person's feelings. But then you say, well, okay, but can we really experience their feelings? Do we really know how they feel? Maybe not.
Yeah.
Because we haven't had the same experiences. And while beliefs are on a head level, emotions are on a heart level. And so what we can do is we can communicate through either, what we say or how we say it, or just by how we show up. We can communicate, hey, I may not understand exactly how you feel, but I understand you're feeling something. And that this something is distressful to you, and I'm there to help you through it. And when we can do that, wow, that's very powerful. And so tact and empathy really combine to be able to, speak the truth and do it in a gentle, kind, caring way that tends to be much more influential.
It's so important, and as you mentioned, as part of emotional intelligence, the research I did for my dissertation was in salespeople. Interestingly, I looked at mortgage salespeople and the impact that empathy and interpersonal skills and all the things that associated with emotional intelligence had on their sales performance, and there was obviously a big correlation. And I think that what you're bringing up is huge for the sales industry specifically, but for just everybody in general, of course.
Sure.
And
sure.
so I love that you're talking about all the stuff that's all that I'm fascinated with. And this is all. I know you have little segments you do on kind of hit on all of these things on your show, and I want to at least get to the fifth one, and then I probably have a couple more questions for you. But what's the fifth area?
Yeah, this one is let go of having to be right, and which is an interesting one because it's sort of, it's that last one that seems to run contrary to the others, because if we're thinking about influence, right, being able to move a person or persons to a desired action, and now we're saying let go of having to be right. Well, won't you be less influential? No, actually, you'll be more influential when you can let go of having to be right. Because first of all, we're not saying you don't want to be right or don't prefer to be right, or that you're not going to be prepared and to do the things. No, of course. What we're saying is to lose your attachment to having to be right or having to be 100% right. Open your mind to other ideas that you may not know or have right now. That doesn't mean you have to accept those other ideas, but you're open. And what happens is two things. One is you put yourself into learner's mode. So you're able to grow. You're able to know something that you don't right now. This is opposite of the person, and we've all known these people who just, once they say something or once they believe something, that's it. I mean, they're not going to allow themselves to be wrong. They're not going to admit they're wrong, even when it's absolutely, and those people aren't respected. Those people aren't more influential because of that. Not at all. These are the people who you kind of say about them, my mind's made up. Don't confuse me with the facts. And what happens is they can't grow. They can't learn anything. And so when you can let go of having to be right, you learn more. So you're more equipped. You actually have more information, which will allow you to be right. So there's the paradox. But also, when this other person realizes that they're dealing with someone who's not just looking to be right at all costs, who's not just looking to be right by making the other person wrong, right? Well, they have more respect for this person, and they're much more likely to be amenable to their ideas.
Well, I think you brought up a lot of really interesting points, because I've had a lot of experts who talk about how a lot of leaders are worried that they're going to be found out that they don't know everything, and they have this sense that maybe if they show that they're not going to give in and say they're not right, because then it maybe makes them look weak. And I was interviewed this week on somebody else's show, and she asked me a question, which is a really tough question, and I won't, I'll just tell you what it was. You don't have to answer it, but because I don't know that it's really an easy question to answer, but it's if the leader doesn't buy into the need for the change in cultural change within the organization, and the rest of the people see that there's a problem, but they can't get anywhere with the leader. Can you change and make an impact without the leader buying in? And it was her question. I mean, you're welcome to jump in on that, but that's a big problem that we hear a lot about. A lot of CEOs. I worked for a CEO that was he was completely closed down to any input from anybody. So what do you do? I mean, that's a tough one, right?
Mm-hmm. And I'm happy to give you my thought on it, but I'd really love to hear yours too. And my feeling is this: you can lead from anywhere to a certain point, okay?
Right.
But to have an overarching cultural change within an organization, to me, the leader needs to buy into it.
Right.
Because typically a company's culture does start at the top and it trickles down. And if you, and even when the leader buys into it, they need to be able to keep this going, and they need to be able to get buy-in, and they need to, and this is when they believe in it.
Right.
If they don't believe in it, they could, even more so. It's just probably not going to happen. What are your thoughts?
Oh no, it's pretty much what I said too. I've had so many cultural experts on the show, and pretty much that it's tough. It's almost like the engagement question. If you've got the third of the workplace engaged and the people that are just completely disengaged, can you help them? Well, there's certain people you can't help, and there's certain leaders you can't help. You know what I mean? It's just they're set. they're never going to change at that point. Or they could do the Steve Jobs thing where he's not going to change. He gets booted out, and then he comes back and goes, "Oh wait, I need to fix this." So sometimes things change, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I mean, it just yeah, I would just when it comes to a certain when it comes to I guess a certain culture or a certain, I always say it's just so much easier when the leader, when they buy into it,
right.
When they have it, when they're, I remember David Marquet, in his book, Turn the Ship Around. It was a wonderful book, and he took over the worst performing nuclear submarine in the U.S. Navy. And the culture previous was totally top down. It was a horrible culture. They had very few reenlistments. And so he really understood that change was needed, and he really kind of took a whole different tack. And it was tough, but what he found was once he got 10% buy-in, it began to then consume the organization a lot more. But you think about this. Had he not really believed in this and stayed with it and kept on coaching his leaders to be able to do this, it just wouldn't have happened. And of course, he did turn the ship around, and it became actually the #1 rated submarine in the Navy. And but boy, it's just so hard when the person who organizationally is at the top, right. Isn't committed to a thing.
Yeah, it definitely is, and those stories are just always so inspiring. The one you gave, I've had Doug Conant on here talking about Campbell Soup, turning that around. There's so many great examples. I mean, how can you have a better story? And writing the handwritten notes and really just going above and beyond. And there's so many great leaders out there, and what you do is so important to inspire and help explain the importance of the culture and all the things that you talk about in all your speeches and and congratulations, a serious award to be into the Speaker Hall of Fame. I mean, that is just amazing. I'm just so impressed with every one of you guys that can reach that level. I had Dr. Willie Jolie on, Jolly, and he sang to me. I don't know if that's your talent, but I got to dream the impossible dream out of him. He was wonderful.
Wow.
I don't know if you're going to break into song, but I know that
I'm known to try singing, but it is not what one would call a strength.
Well, if you sing, can you sing in Zig Ziglar's voice? Now that would be an accomplishment.
That would be difficult. Wow, you've got me on that one.
I got
because,
you something to work toward. Well, this has been so much fun, Bob. You are really a fascinating man, and your books are, no wonder you're top 200 most influential authors in the world and all the awards you've won. I was really looking forward to our conversation, and I really enjoyed having you on the show. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, likewise. Thank you, and thank you for all the great work you're doing.